возможным крупным совместным инвестиционным проектам.
Regarding bilateral meetings, we just concluded a private, working meeting with the President of Uzbekistan. We discussed our current affairs and plans for the near future, aligning on potential large-scale joint investment projects. In my opinion, and that of Shavkat Miramonovich Mirziyoyev, these are entirely feasible initiatives. We talked about energy, including possibly the nuclear energy sector, infrastructure projects, and the metallurgical industry. In general, there are serious matters that our governments have been discussing for some time, and we are gradually moving toward their implementation. The second meeting was with the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. We also discussed our current bilateral relations and are expecting a visit from the President of the United Arab Emirates to Russia. Naturally, in both cases, we addressed the situation on the Ukrainian front and the Middle East. As for the results of today's EAEU summit, we are satisfied with the outcomes. We reviewed certain results. The President of Belarus already mentioned that our development strategy, which was set to conclude this year, is nearing completion. We are thinking about how to structure our joint work moving forward. Overall, the results cannot fail to satisfy us. They satisfy everyone. Why? Because the main integral indicator of economic efficiency is the rate of economic growth. In the EAEU, it is higher than the global average. The global growth rate is 3.3%, as is known, while in the EAEU, it's significantly more than 4%, and in some countries, much higher, around 5%, and in some, approaching 6%, I believe. Therefore, this is, not least, the result of our joint work, as its essence lies in removing trade and other economic barriers to cooperation. Without exaggeration, this multiplies the opportunities for economic growth and also social indicators of economic development, such as unemployment levels and real wage growth. In other countries, it's roughly the same. I'll speak about Russia. We have 2.3% unemployment. This is, after all, one of the key indicators in all economies worldwide of what's happening in the economy. It's roughly the same in our other countries. Another very important indicator is the level of investments. They are increasing in Russia, despite all our known challenges, and this process continues. Of course, we cannot be dissatisfied with this work.
Возможности роста экономики, но и как такие социальный показатель развития экономики это, конечно, и уровень безработицы, и уровень роста.
But there are always issues requiring additional attention. In the closed meeting, we discussed issues related to removing barriers in the services sector. There are matters requiring further study, such as electronic signatures. This is a very important area. It's not an informal matter. Its introduction at the international level would also create good conditions for expanding cooperation.
Второй очень важный показатель – это уровень инвестиций. Они у нас увеличиваются и в России, несмотря на все наши известные.
There are also issues we discussed today in general, related to ensuring authenticity, regulating sanctions in case of violations, and so forth, to prevent economic actors from shifting from one jurisdiction to another but operating within a single economic space. There's nothing here that poses political complexities. We all believe we must move in this direction.
Связанные со снятием барьеров в сфере услуг, но здесь есть вопросы, требующие дополнительного исследования. Есть.
It's a legal technical matter. It primarily needs to be regulated and finalized at the government level. We agreed to address this in the coming months.
На межнациональном уровне тоже создаст хорошие условия для расширения сотрудничества. Здесь тоже есть вопросы, которые мы сегодня в общем и целом обсуждали, связанные с тем, чтобы достоверность подтверждалась, связанные с тем, как мы будем регулировать санкции в случае каких-то нарушений и так далее, с тем, чтобы участники экономической деятельности не перетекали из одной юрисдикции в другую, а действовали в рамках единого экономического пространства. То есть нет ничего такого, что составляло бы сложности какого-то политического характера. Все мы считаем, что по этому пути надо идти. Вопрос это...
The next meeting, which is usually informal but still business-related, will, as per tradition, take place in St. Petersburg on the eve of the new year.
Мы этим и займемся в ближайшие месяцы. И ближайшая встреча, она носит неформальный характер, как правило, но все-таки связана с деловой частью. Так вот, очередная встреча уже по традиции пройдет в преддверии Нового года в Петербурге.
As for sanctions, well, yes, sanctions. Honestly, we mentioned them formally, but no one delved into the topic seriously.
Здравствуйте, РИА Новости. Если можно, у меня по другой теме вопрос, но тоже очень важный.
Hello, RIA Novosti. If I may, I have a question on a different but also very important topic. You mentioned that recent bilateral contacts touched on the Ukrainian issue.
Украинского урегулирования, в частности, когда состоится третий раунд переговоров между...
Could you tell us how the Ukrainian settlement process is progressing, particularly when the third round of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will take place, given that 2 rounds have already occurred in Istanbul?
Как вам проект?
It's also known that the parties exchanged draft memoranda on the settlement. How do you assess Kiev's draft? Was there any reaction from Kiev to Russia's draft memorandum?
Что касается меморандумов, то, как и ожидалось, ничего неожиданного.
Regarding the memoranda, as expected, nothing unexpected happened. I won't tell you anything unexpected either. These are 2 completely opposite memoranda, but negotiations are organized and conducted precisely to find ways to converge.
Ну, а то, что они были прямо противоположными, мне кажется, здесь удивительного тоже ничего нет. Детализировать я бы не хотел, потому что...
That they are directly opposite seems to me not surprising at all. I wouldn't want to go into details because I consider it inappropriate, even harmful, to preempt the negotiations themselves. As for what has been done following the negotiations, I think you can see for yourselves. Today, I believe, another exchange took place. Or was it yesterday? Today, I think, yes. And this is important.
Как дипломаты говорят, для субстантивного обсуждения сути проблемы. Мы договаривались таким образом, что продолжим дальнейшие контакты после завершения обменов.
The humanitarian component matters because it creates conditions for, as diplomats say, substantive discussion of the issue's essence. We agreed to continue further contacts after completing the exchanges and after the humanitarian action we proposed, namely the transfer of the bodies of our fallen servicemen. We have already handed over more than 6,000 bodies and are ready to transfer nearly 3,000 more, but it's up to the Ukrainian side to accept the bodies of their fallen soldiers. We agreed that after completing this stage, we would hold the third round of negotiations. Overall, we are ready for this. We need to agree on a place and time.
В целом мы к этому готовы. Нужно согласовать место, время. Ну, рассчитываю, что президент Турецкой Республики, господин Эрдоган, остается на своих позициях по поддержке этого процесса.
I expect that the President of the Republic of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, remains supportive of this process. We are very grateful to him for this. We are ready to hold such a meeting in Istanbul. As for when exactly, the leaders of the negotiating groups from both sides, who, by the way, are in constant operational contact with each other, are arranging it. They call each other regularly, and in my view, this is already a good thing. They are now coordinating the timing of the next meeting. As for what the subject will be, in my view, it should be the discussion of the memoranda from both sides. Yes, please.
Добрый день, Павел Зарубин, телеканал России. Вот у вас, ваших коллег, только что завершился саммит.
Good afternoon, Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. Your and your colleagues' Eurasian Union summit just concluded, while your former partners recently held a NATO summit, where a decision was made to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP. And in general, there's a barrage of voices from Europe calling for militarization. Such an aggressive stance from Europe. Is this something new in modern history? How do you assess what's happening?
Во-первых, так называемое западное сообщество, коллективный Запад.
Thank you. First, the so-called Western community, the collective West, if it can even be called collective today, turns everything upside down. Why? Because the increase in spending on military purposes and the militaristic frenzy we just mentioned are all based on one thesis, Russia's aggressiveness. But it's exactly the opposite. The starting point for all these discussions is 2022, the beginning of the special military operation. But no one says a word about how we, all of us, got to this special military operation. It all started with what? With the fact that we were deceived, bluntly, as people say, screwed over regarding NATO's non-expansion eastward. It's well known to the whole world that Russia was promised not 1 inch to the east. And then, one wave of expansion followed another. What did we keep saying?
Обманули грубо, как у нас в народе говорят, кинули просто по поводу нерасширения НАТО на восток. Ведь хорошо всему миру известно, что России было обещано, ни одного дюйма на восток НАТО продвигаться не будет. И потом...
That the security of one country or group of countries cannot be ensured at the expense of another security. This is written in international documents that everyone agreed to. What happened in practice? One expansion after another, and we were constantly told, well, you shouldn't be afraid of this, it doesn't threaten you. When we responded that we consider it a threat, what did they say? Nothing at all. They just brushed us off with our opinion. No one took it into account or wanted to. But we know better what threatens us and what doesn't. It's our right to determine the degree of our security and the level of threats that may approach us from one side or another. But no one listened, and they kept moving in that direction. Isn't that aggressive behavior? It is aggressive behavior, which the West doesn't want to acknowledge. The same thing happened in our country when the collective West supported separatism in our country and such a tool of fighting Russia as terrorism.
Разве это не агрессивное поведение? Это и есть агрессивное поведение, на которое Запад не хочет обращать внимание. То же самое было в нашей стране, когда коллективный Запад поддерживал и сепаратизм в нашей стране. И такой инструмент...
No one wanted to pay attention to some EHL operating in Russia, explosions in Moscow, and so on, up until recently. No one wants to pay attention to it. Everything is fine as long as it's against Russia. What? We didn't see that. They see and understand everything perfectly well but talk about something else. They talk about our aggressiveness. Look at yourselves. There's a good proverb. They notice a speck in someone else's eye but don't want to see the log in their own. And what happens? Against the backdrop of this rhetoric about Russia's alleged aggressiveness, they start talking about the need to arm themselves.
И что происходит? Вот на фоне этой риторики об якобы мнимой агрессивности России начинают говорить о необходимости вооружаться. Ну, пускай вооружаются. Но давайте посмотрим на структуру этих расходов, на структуру этих вооружений. Первую часть я сказал. Мы считаем абсолютно необоснованной ссылка на агрессивность России. Не мы агрессивны, а Запад этот так называемый коллективный агрессивный. То же самое на Украине, кстати, происходило. А что же?
Well, let them arm themselves. Let's look at the structure of these expenditures, the structure of these armaments. In the first part, I said we consider the reference to Russia's aggressiveness completely unfounded. We are not aggressive. The so-called collective West is aggressive. The same thing, by the way, happened in Ukraine. What do you call what happened as a result of a coup supported by the collective West? They came, signed guarantees between the president, the presidential authority, and the opposition. Then a few days later staged a coup, supported it, paid money for it, and publicly admitted to it. And then they started saying that Russia is behaving aggressively.
Кровавой войны там против гражданского, по сути, населения. И мы 8 лет пытались договориться, чтобы мирным путем решить этот вопрос. Нас обманули, публично признались опять об этом. Ну и бывший канцлер, и ФРГ, и бывший президент Франции публично рассказали, что не собирались не выполнять Минских соглашений, а все это подписали только для...
What's that about? Are they idiots? Or do they take us for fools? Then, as we all know, what happened in Donbass? 8 years. 8 years of bloody war against what is essentially a civilian population. For 8 years, we tried to resolve this issue peacefully. They deceived us, publicly admitted it again. Both the former Chancellor of Germany and the former President of France publicly said they had no intention of implementing the Minsk agreements. They signed them only to arm the Ukrainian regime.
Вчера на свет появились. Так не пойдет. Эта игра в одни ворота закончилась. Хотят увеличить свои расходы.
And they waged this undeclared war for 8 years. We, to put an end to this war, were ultimately forced to use armed forces, recognizing the independence of both republics in strict accordance with the UN Charter. No one pays attention to that. They only focus on what happened from that moment. Why? What happened? How did it happen? What's their fault? As if they're infants who just appeared yesterday. That won't do. This one-sided game is over. They want to increase their military spending? Let them. That also speaks to their aggressiveness. Let me explain why. Yes, our spending today is significant.
А во время войны во Вьетнаме 10%. Решали, правда, эти проблемы.
6.3% of GDP. Is that a lot or a little? I think it's a lot. It's certainly one of the challenges, including for the budget, that we must address. And we are addressing it decently.
Более здраво, но мы боремся за здоровую макроэкономику. Теперь по поводу самих расходов. 6,3%. Много это или мало?
By the way, I don't want to draw political analogies now because the reasons for conflicts are completely different. But purely from a financial economic perspective, let's say, during the Korean War, which the US waged, they spent 14% of their budget on it. During the Vietnam War, 10%. They addressed these issues mainly by increasing taxation on high-income individuals. In the first case, they paid no attention to macroeconomics. In the second, they approached it more sensibly. But we are fighting for a healthy macroeconomy. Now, about the expenditures themselves, 6.3%. Is that a lot or a little? 6.3% of Russia's GDP for defense needs is 13.5 trillion rubles. Our total GDP is 223 trillion rubles. Is 13.5 out of 223 a lot or a little? It's not insignificant. We paid for it with inflation, but we are now fighting this inflation, deliberately aiming for the economy to make a soft landing, so to speak. Nevertheless, we approach this very sensibly. By the way, I already mentioned that the level of wages is increasing in all EAEU countries and in Russia. Last year, it increased by 9.7%, and in the first 4 or 5 months of this year, it added 4% in real terms. This is, by the way, at least a satisfactory indicator. What's happening in Western countries? They keep burying us. They'll die themselves soon, but they keep burying us non-stop. Our economic growth last year was 4.3%, the year before that 4.3%, 4.1%. This year, it will be much more modest to combat inflation, but we are doing this deliberately. In the Eurozone, growth is 0.9%. The leading economies, industrial development centers in Europe, like Germany and France, are teetering on the edge of recession. As for the armed forces, they keep saying we have problems, that will soon face strategic defeat. This rhetoric about Russia hasn't stopped, and at the same time, they claim we're going to attack NATO countries.
Вещают о том, что мы собираемся нападать на страны НАТО. Логика-то где? Если у нас все разваливается, что же мы собираемся нападать на НАТО? Ну, чушь несут, и сами в это точно не верят, а свое население стараются в этом убедить для того, чтобы выдавить из людей.
Where's the logic? If everything is falling apart for us, how are we supposed to attack NATO? They're talking nonsense, and they don't even believe it themselves. But they try to convince their populations to squeeze more money out of them and make them agree to bear the heavy burden of these social expenditures. By the way, we spend these trillions largely on supporting our defense industrial complex, on ourselves, our loved ones, and our dear ones. And what will they spend their 5% on? On purchases from the US and supporting their defense industrial complex. That's not our issue. If they want to do it, let them. But here's the main thing. We are planning to reduce defense spending. In the next year, the year after, and over the next 3 years, we are planning, well, there's no final agreement yet between the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Economic Development.
Минэкономразвития, но в целом все думают именно в этом направлении. А Европа думает о том, как поднять свои расходы на оборону. Так кто готовится к каким-то агрессивным действиям? Мы или они? Мы, да, хотим завершить...
But everyone is thinking in this direction. Meanwhile, Europe is thinking about how to increase their spending instead. So, who's preparing for aggressive actions? Us or them? Yes, we want to complete the special military operation with the result we need, of course. But that's what it's all about, not aggressive plans against Europe and NATO countries. We are planning to reduce spending. They are planning to increase it. So, who's acting aggressively? That's the basis of defense and security policy. So, all their talk about increasing spending, let them increase it,
В сфере безопасности ситуацию для них не улучшит, а в сфере экономики...
But it won't improve their security situation. It will inevitably worsen their economic and social spheres.
Агентство «Интерфакс», Ксения Черняева. Владимир Владимирович, буквально недавно президент Франции...
Interfax Agency, Ksenia Chertneva. Vladimir Vladimirovic. Recently, the President of France announced the need for another package of sanctions against Russia.
В этот пакет санкций могут войти такие меры, как снижение...
According to statements by European officials, this package may include measures such as lowering the price cap on Russian oil to $45 and secondary sanctions on its buyers. How do you view these measures, the rhetoric of the French president, and what could be the consequences of such decisions?
Я уже отчасти ответил на этот вопрос. Чем больше санкций, тем хуже для...
I've already partly answered this question. The more sanctions, the worse it is for those imposing them. This applies to France and the European economy as a whole. If you look at the statistics, the volume of gas purchases, for example, has increased due to LNG. Europe is buying more now.
Стало покупать. Ну, это вот сегодня сколько там? 400 с лишним долларов за... евро за 1000 кубов. Сейчас чуть-чуть припала цена...
Today, it's over $400 per 1,000 cubic meters. The price of oil has dropped a bit, not a bit, from $75 to $65 or $60, fluctuating all the time. But if something happens in the Middle East, what then? They'll try to cap our oil? Even if they try, it won't work. It's practically impossible today. The volumes of oil and petroleum products consumed globally are growing with the economy.
Растут в связи с ростом самой экономики. От этого никуда не деться. Объемы растут. А добыча-то увеличивается только в том...
There's no escaping that. The volumes are increasing, but production only increases as much as we agreed within OPEC+, calculated for the growing demand, especially in the summer. You see, I don't see anything here that would benefit the European economy. Will it harm us? We'll see, based on the realities that unfold, but I don't think it will significantly affect us.
Тех реалий, которые будут складываться, но я не думаю, что это существенным образом на нас...
I mean, hundreds of thousands of sanctions have already been imposed, and we are where we are.
И мы находимся там, где мы находимся, как я уже сказал.
As I said, our economy grew 4.3% last year, while the Eurozone's was 0.9%. Please, go ahead, Andrei.
Добрый день, Андрей Колесников, газета «Коммерсант». Владимир Владимирович, нет ли у вас...
Good afternoon, Andrei Kolesnikov, Kommersant newspaper. Vladimir Vladimirovic, don't you feel it's time to personally meet with Donald Trump? From the outside, it feels like you're somehow drifting apart. A phone is a phone, but as they say, face-to-face is face-to-face. What do you think?
Я отношусь к действующему президенту Соединенных Штатов с большим уважением. Он прошел очень тяжелый, сложный...
I have great respect for the current President of the United States. He has gone through a very difficult, complex, and unsafe path to return to power and to the White House. We all know this well, including the fact that he survived assassination attempts, not just one.
То, что он делает внутри страны, то, что он делает в сфере, там, скажем, ситуации на Ближнем Востоке, и его усилия.
He is a courageous man, that's clear. What he's doing domestically, in the sphere of, say, the situation in the Middle East, and his efforts to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. We, of course, greatly appreciate all this. I've said this before, and I want to say it publicly now. I believe President Trump sincerely strives to resolve the issue on the Ukrainian track. He recently stated, I believe, that it turned out to be more complicated than it seemed from the outside.
И здесь тоже ничего особенного нет. Одно дело, когда смотреть со стороны, а другое дело погрузиться в проблему. Так же, как, я думаю, и происходит и на Ближнем Востоке.
Well, that's how it is. There's nothing special about that. It's one thing to look from the outside, another to dive into the problem. I think the same is happening in the Middle East. Although he may have had more experience and was more involved in Middle Eastern events, it's still complicated there. Real life is always more complex than perceptions of it. I'm always open to contacts, to meetings, and I know that Mr. Trump has also expressed the possibility of meetings.
Господин Трамп тоже высказывал говорил о возможности встреч. Ну, я так же, как и он, считаю, что такие встречи нужно готовить. И
Like him, I believe such meetings need to be prepared. And based on the results, we should reach new milestones of cooperation. Overall, thanks to President Trump, relations between Russia and the United States are starting to level out in some ways. Not everything is resolved in the sphere of diplomatic relations, but the first steps have been taken, and we are moving forward. We have established working contact between key agencies, between the State Department and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, between special services.
у нас рабочий контакт налажен между основными ведомствами и между Госдепом и Министерством иностранных дел, между специальными службами, что тоже очень важно, потому что, скажем, такой аспект, как
Which is also very important because, for example, the fight against terrorism is important to us in any situation. And through some other services, we have very promising prospects in the sphere of economic interaction. We know that American businesses are showing desire, aspiration,
что американский бизнес проявляет желание, стремление и посылает нам сигналы о том, что они хотели бы.
and sending us signals that they would like to return to our market. We will only welcome this. All this needs to be prepared. But overall, such a meeting is entirely possible, and we will gladly prepare for it.